First of all, it's not a secret. We know who they are. It's Christine Lagarde, her first head of the IMF, her first deputy managing director, David Lipton, professors like Larry Summers and Ken Rogoff at Harvard, public intellectuals here in the UK, Adair Turner, Anatol Koletsky, Mario Draghi, head of the European Central Bank. So it's a collection of central bankers, finance ministers, academics, think tankers, and public intellectuals, and several hundred of them around the world who collectively run the international monetary system, because they either run the central banks or the multilateral institutions, or they're in and out of finance ministries, or they have a lot of influence. So that's who they are.
They influence 90% of what happens,
or more. Exactly.
Okay. So there's no secret that it's some other guy.
We know who they are. Okay. So then, what about the hooded robes part? And the answer is, they don't need that. You just said conspiracies fall apart, and they do. Conspiracies are kind of easy to spot most of the time. It's more the case that they're like-minded individuals. They don't need top-down organization because they all agree with each other. They all went to the same schools. They went to Oxford, Cambridge, MIT, Harvard, Chicago, Stanford, like 6 or 7 schools in the whole world. They all went to them.
Tell us about the CIA. What would we not realize goes on in the CIA? And what are some things that happen and things that don't happen?
Well, the things you can talk about, things you can't. But I would say that just organizationally, I started my career at Citibank when at the time they were the largest bank in the world, had offices in 103 countries, 300,000 employees, et cetera. And I've worked in startups, like 3 guys and an idea and a little seed capital. So I've worked in all size organizations. And the one thing I come away with is every organization has a culture. It's unique to that organization. Usually it's top down. The Greeks have an expression, a fish stinks from the head down, but that's true, but every organization has a culture. The culture of the CIA is different than any other organization I've ever worked with. And the reason is that there's so little they can say to the outside world that they end up, it's like a family. Everybody's their own frame of reference. You can talk more freely to your fellow agency, operatives or analysts, or as the case may be, than you can to your spouse. And so that creates a very insular world where when you're at headquarters and you're talking to peers, you feel like you're in a family, but when you go outside, it's like, well, I can't talk about that, or I can't say that, or whatever. So there's a very strong internal culture. Having said that, you're also trained to be aware of what's called social engineering, which is, there's a Starbucks on the main floor at CIA headquarters in Langley, and I've heard, I can't prove it, but I've heard it's the busiest Starbucks in the world, highest revenue Starbucks in the world, because it's open 24 hours a day, and you got a lot of caffeine junkies, and they're working 24 hours a day, or somebody's working, so this place is always, and I'm the kind of guy, I guess other people are saying, you're standing in line, you might chat with the person next to you, hey, nice day, what do you do, whatever. Well, you're taught to view that with suspicion. You're like, well, why is this person asking me what I do? Are they out of their lane? Is this a mole trying to pick my brain, follow me? And so there's a certain amount of paranoia, well-intentioned paranoia, that goes along with so you have this family community where you can only talk to each other, but then you're trained to be suspicious of each other because you don't know who Aldra James is. And then there's finally compartmentalization, which kind of goes to the social engineering thing I mentioned, which is, just because you have, beyond top secret, security clearances you wouldn't believe, doesn't mean you get to poke around. You have to start with a security clearance. That's the first hurdle. But then you have to have what's called a need to know. Like, why are you asking? And then if you can get over that, you get what's called read in. So you're read into the program. Maybe now you have access to something. But, I would do research and I would want to know something legitimately. But if I wasn't kind of read into that program, you had to ask permission. You had to go to a security officer. You had to be a waiting period. And then they come back and say, okay, you can see this. But you can't just troll through the Kennedy assassination files just because you're curious. Those cultural markers of, a kind of a bubble, closed circuit family, very tight knit on the one hand, but trained to be suspicious on the other, amplified by compartmentalization, makes it a unique culture. I'll leave it at that. And then you have cases like John Bolton coming out of a classified national security meeting with a few notes on a legal pad, and then standing up in front of a press conference, but you can see the pad on the camera. So it said like send troops to Colombia or something, you know, because of Venezuela. So there are blunders. I think it was one like that in the UK. I don't know if it was Theresa May or somebody, again, getting out of the backseat of a limo, but with a pad with some visible writing on it. And then, of course, you know, as an intelligence analyst, you're like, well, is that disinformation? They're doing that on purpose to make us think it's classified, but it isn't really, you know. So now you're in what we call the wilderness of mirrors.